See also History of Gwynedd during the High Middle Ages. Culture and society in Gwynedd during the High Middle Ages refers to a period in the history of Wales spanning the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries. The High Middle Ages were preceded by the Early Middle Ages and followed by the Late Middle Ages. Gwynedd is located in the north of Wales. Distinctive achievements in Gwynedd during this period include further development of medieval Welsh literature, for instance in the poetry of those of the Beirdd y Tywysogion associated with the court of Gwynedd, the reformation of bardic schools, and the continued development of Cyfraith Hywel, all three of which further contributed to the development of a Welsh national identity in the face of Anglo-Norman encroachment of Wales and the threat of conquest by the Crown of England. Gwynedd's traditional territory included Anglesey and all of North Wales between the River Dyfi in the south and River Dee in the northeast. The Irish Sea lies to the north and west, and lands formerly part of the Powys border the southeast. Gwynedd's strength was due in part to the region's mountainous geography, which made it difficult for foreign invaders to campaign in the country and impose their will effectively. Gwynedd emerged from the early Middle Ages having suffered from increasing Viking raids and various occupations by rival Welsh princes, causing political and social upheaval, with the historic Aberfraw family displaced. By the mid-11th century, Gwynedd was united with the rest of Wales by the conquest of Gruffydd ap Llywelyn, followed by the Norman invasions between 1067 and 1100. After the restoration of the Aberfraw family in Gwynedd, a series of successful rulers such as Gruffydd ap Cynan and Owain Gwynedd in the late 11th and 12th centuries, and Llywelyn the Great and his grandson Llywelyn ap Gruffydd in the 13th century, led to the emergence of the Principality of Wales. Based on Gwynedd, the emergence of the Principality in the 13th century showed that all the elements necessary for the growth of Welsh statehood were in place, and that Wales was independent de facto, according to historian Dr. John Davies. As part of the Principality of Wales, Gwynedd retained Welsh laws and customs and home rule until the Edwardian conquest of Wales of 1282. Settlements, architecture, and economy. When Gruffydd ap Cynan died in 1137, he left a more stable realm than had existed in Gwynedd for more than 100 years. No foreign army was able to cross the Conwy into Upper Gwynedd. The stability in Upper Gwynedd provided by Gruffydd and his son Owain Gwynedd between 1101 and 1170 allowed Gwynedd's inhabitants to plan for the future without fear that home and harvest would go to the flames from invaders. Settlements in Gwynedd became more permanent, with buildings of stone replacing timber structures. Stone churches in particular were built across Gwynedd, with so many limoshed that Gwynedd was bespangled with them, as is the firmament with stars. Gruffydd had built stone churches at his princely manors, and Lloyd suggests that his example led to the rebuilding of churches in stone in Penmon, Aberdaron, and Tywyn in the Norman fashion. By the 13th century, Gwynedd was the cornerstone of the Principality of Wales, which came to encompass 3/4 of the area of modern Wales, from Anglesey to Macon, from the outskirts of Chester to the outskirts of Sidwelley. By 1271, Prince Llywelyn ap Gruffydd could claim a growing population of about 200,000, a little less than 3/4 of the total Welsh population. Population increase was common throughout Europe in the 13th century, but in Wales it was more pronounced. By Llywelyn II's reign, as much as 10% of the population were town dwellers. Additionally, unfree slaves had long disappeared from within Pura Walla due in large part from the social upheavals of the 11th century, argued Davies. The increase in freemen allowed the prince to call on and field a far more substantial and professional army. The increase in population in Gwynedd, and in the Principality of Wales as a whole, allowed a greater diversification of the economy. The Merionid tax rolls evidence the 37 various professions present in Merionid immediately before the Edwardian conquest of 1282. Of these professions, there were 8 goldsmiths, 4 professional bards, 26 shoemakers, a doctor in Kinwood and an hotel keeper in Maintwog, and 28 priests, 2 of whom were university graduates. Also present were a significant number of fishermen, administrators and clerics, professional men and craftsmen. With the average temperature of Wales a degree or 2 higher than it is today, more Welsh lands were arable, a crucial bonus for a country like Wales, wrote historian Dr. John Davies. Important for Gwynedd and Pura Walla were more developed trade routes, which allowed the introduction of the windmill, the fulling mill, and the horse collar. Gwynedd exported cattle, skins, cheese, timber, horses, wax, dogs, hawks, and fleeces, and also flannel. Flannel was second only to cattle among the Principality's exports. In exchange, the Principality imported salt, wine, wheat, and other luxuries from London and Paris. But most importantly for its defence, Gwynedd also imported iron and specialised weaponry. England exploited Welsh dependence on foreign imports to wear down Gwynedd and the Principality of Wales in times of conflict between the two countries. The Welsh Church in Gwynedd, Celtic Christian traditions prior to the Norman invasions between 1067 to 1101. Christians of Gwynedd shared many of the spiritual traditions and ecclesiastical institutions found throughout Wales and other Celtic nations. Customs inherited from the Celtic Christianity of the early Middle Ages. However, Welsh ecclesiastics questioned to what degree the papacy could impose canon law upon them, especially with regard to the marriage of priests, the role of women both in the church and in society, and the status of illegitimate children in society, with canon law conflicting with native Welsh law and customs. Welsh bishops also denied that the Archbishop of Canterbury held authority over them. Professor John Davies argued that there were dangers inherent in Welsh bishops submitting to an ecclesiastical authority that would, by necessity, be heavily under the influence of an English king. By the 11th century, the Welsh Church consisted of 3 dioceses which were tied closely together by a strong sense of community and a shared sentiment in religious practice, but were independent of each other and whose boundaries were somewhat indeterminate. Central to this organizational approach was the rural nature of Welsh settlements, which favored localized and autonomous monastic communities, called clasor. Clasor were administered by an abbot and contained a number of small timber-built churches and dormitory huts. Welsh monasticism highly valued asceticism, and the most celebrated Welsh ascetic was the 6th-century Street David, who developed a monastic rule which emphasized hard work, encouraged vegetarianism, and promoted temperance. Women, who held a higher status in Welsh law and custom than elsewhere in Europe, could hold quasi-sacerdotal roles in the Welsh Church, noted Davies, as celibacy was not an important aspect of the Welsh Church. Many priests married and had children, some monasteries were single or extended family endeavors, and some ecclesiastical offices became hereditary. For many Welsh people, monasticism was a familial way of life spent in devotion to Christ, as marriage was viewed as a secular social contract and governed by well-established Welsh law. Divorce was recognized by the Welsh Church. The Diocese of Bangor was the episcopal see for all of Upper and Lower Gwynedd. Latin Christianity post-Norman invasion. Griffith I of Gwynedd promoted the primacy of the episcopal see of Bangor in Gwynedd, and funded the building of Bangor Cathedral during the episcopate of David the Scot, Bishop of Bangor, between 1120 to 1139. Grufford's remains were interred in a tomb in the presbytery of Bangor Cathedral. Government and law. Aberfraw's traditional sphere of influence in North Wales included the Isle of Anglesey as their early seat of authority, and Gwynedd Uwch Conwy, and Aberfed Vlad, also known as Gwynedd Conwy. Additional lands were acquired through vassalage or conquest, and by regaining lands lost to marcher lords, particularly those of Ceredigion, Powys Fadog, and Powys Wenwynwen. However, these areas were always considered additions to Gwynedd, never as part of Gwynedd itself. The extent of the kingdom varied with the strength of the current ruler. The kingdom was administered under Welsh custom through 13 cantifi, each containing, in theory, 100 settlements a trefi. Most cantifi were divided further into siamidae. Gwynedd at war. According to Sir John Edward Lloyd, the challenges of campaigning in Gwynedd and Wales as a whole were exposed during the Norman invasions between 1081 and 1101. If a defender could bar any road, control any river crossing a mountain pass, and control the coastline around Wales, then the risks of extended campaigning in Wales were too great. With control of the Menai, an army could regroup on Anglesey. Without control of the Menai, an army could be stranded there, and any occupying force on Anglesey could deny the vast harvest of that island to the Welsh, and the Welsh throughout Wales could lead retaliatory strikes from mountain strongholds or remote forested glens. The Welsh were revered for the skills of the bowmen, and they learned from the Normans. During the generations of warfare and close contact with the Normans, Griffith I and other Welsh leaders learned the arts of knighthood and adapted them for Wales. By Grufford's death in 1137, Gwynedd could field hundreds of heavy, well-armed cavalry as well as the traditional bowmen and infantry. In the end, Wales was defeated militarily by the improved ability of the English navy to blockade seas areas essential for agricultural production, such as Anglesey. Lack of food would force the disbandment of any large Welsh force besieged in the mountains. Following the occupation, Welsh soldiers were conscripted to serve in the English army. During the revolt of Orwain Glyndwr, the Welsh adapted the new skills they had learned to guerrilla tactics and lightning raids. Orwain reputedly used the mountains to such advantage that many of the exasperated English soldiery suspected him of being a magician able to control the natural elements.